we're going to unravel one of the most fascinating geographic mysteries on our planet. Look at a map of the world, and right there, between the westernmost tip of North America and the easternmost edge of Asia, sits this tiny 55-mile gap separating the United States and Russia. It's a space that has literally captured human imagination for millennia. So today, we're going to explore the modern myth of crossing this gap and compare it to an ancient reality that fundamentally shaped the human race.
Now, this is arguably the internet's favorite geographical hypothetical. I mean, we've all seen it pop up on forums like Reddit, right? Can you walk from Russia to the US in winter? It's an incredibly tempting idea. At their closest point, the Little Diomede Island in the US and Big Diomede in Russia are just a couple of miles apart. In our minds, winter rolls around. The ocean freezes into this neat, flat sheet of ice, and you just take a brisk hike across the international dateline. But as we're about to see, the internet's imagination doesn't exactly match reality.
If we actually look at the answers from locals and geography buffs who know the region, the brutal reality becomes pretty clear. You absolutely cannot just walk across. First off, that 55 miles of water doesn't just freeze into a solid, safe ice rink. Strong oceanic currents constantly push through the Bering Strait, creating these massive, unpredictable channels of open water. The sea ice is constantly shifting and breaking apart. It's like a giant, unstable treadmill. Combine that with the fact that there are zero roads leading to this area on either side, crippling extreme cold, and heavily armed military border zones where crossing will get you immediately arrested. Yeah, it's basically an impossible task.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that despite everything I just told you about how impossible this is, one man has spent the last 27 years of his life proving the absolute limits of human endurance. Meet British ex-paratrooper Carl Bushby.
Carl is the mastermind behind the Goliath expedition. His goal? To complete the very first unbroken, continuous walk around the entire world. We are talking about a mind-boggling 36,000-mile journey that started all the way down in Punta Arenas, Chile back in November 1998. And the absolute strictest rule of his whole expedition is that he must rely on absolutely zero transportation. No cars, no planes, no boats, just his own 2 feet.
So you're probably wondering, how did Carl handle the Bering Strait? Well, in March 2006, accompanied by an adventurer named Dmitry Kiefer, he actually did it. But it wasn't a straight 55-mile walk. Because of that treacherous shifting ice we talked about, they had to navigate a winding, indirect 150-mile path over 14 grueling days. They were literally hopping from iceberg to iceberg over a 58-mile ocean span. It was a completely death-defying feat. And their grand reward upon finally reaching the Siberian coast? They were immediately detained by Russian border authorities for entering through an unauthorized point.
Tracing his journey over the years, you really get a sense of Carl's immense grit. I mean, the physical walk is only half the battle. The geopolitics are the rest. He faced visa expirations that forced him all the way back to Alaska. In 2013, Russia slapped him with a 5-year entry ban. His response to that? He walked over 3,000 miles across the United States to the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C., just to protest the decision. Fast forward to 2024, and to avoid geopolitical risks altogether, he spent 132 hours in the water, swimming 179 miles across the Caspian Sea, just to keep his unbroken journey alive.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Because as incredible as Carl Bushby's modern journey is, if he had attempted this walk 20,000 years ago, he wouldn't have needed to jump across a single iceberg. Today, sure, we face a 55-mile wide freezing ocean. But 20,000 years ago, this exact same spot was a massive dry landmass up to 1,000 kilometers wide.
This prehistoric region is known as Beringia. And when we say land bridge, please don't picture a narrow little strip of sand or some fragile bridge of ice. Beringia was a colossal geographical area spanning roughly 1.6 million square kilometers. To put that into perspective, that's the size of the Canadian provinces of British Columbia and Alberta combined. It connected Asia and North America into one continuous, totally walkable supercontinent.
So how did a landmass that huge just appear? Well, it all comes down to the number 50. During the last glacial period, massive amounts of the Earth's water were locked up in these towering global ice sheets. Because so much water was frozen on land, global sea levels dropped dramatically, by more than 50 meters. Now, the Bering Strait today has an average depth of only 40 to 50 meters, so when the sea level dropped, it completely exposed the shallow seafloor, essentially turning an ocean into a continent.
Now here's where our intuition kind of tricks us. You hear Ice Age, and you're probably picturing Beringia buried under a mile of ice, right? Actually, scratch that. The reality was vastly different. Beringia was unglaciated because it experienced very light snowfall.
Instead of glaciers, it was a dry, cold environment known as the Mammoth Steppe. It received just enough moisture from the North Pacific to support a highly diverse shrub tundra habitat filled with grasses and herbs. So it wasn't a frozen wasteland at all, it was a vital ecological refugium.
And this unique climate had a massive impact. Because of this rich vegetation, Beringia became an ecological highway. Massive herbivores that were adapted to the dry steppe thrived here. Woolly mammoths, saiga antelope, and ancient caballeid horses didn't just survive in Beringia, they used this massive plain to migrate freely back and forth between the continents of Asia and North America.
The really crucial point here is that Beringia was a lifesaver. Just look at the gray wolf. About 25,000 years ago, during the last glacial maximum, global gray wolf populations suffered a severe bottleneck. I mean, they nearly went extinct. But a population of them found a safe haven in the shrub tundra of Beringia. They survived the worst of the Ice Age right there and eventually expanded out to completely repopulate Eurasia and North America.
Okay, let's dive into this next phase, the first human journey, peopling the Americas.
Because it wasn't just wolves and mammoths utilizing this land bridge. Thanks to some incredible recent advances in archaeogenetics, specifically from remains found at the Upward Sun River site in Alaska, we now know that a population of Paleolithic hunter-gatherers from eastern Siberia made their way into Beringia. The genetic data clearly shows that about 20,000 years ago, right at the height of the last glacial maximum, a distinct ancient Beringian lineage diverged. These resourceful humans were living, hunting, and surviving right there on the land bridge.
Let's trace how this incredible journey unfolded over time. 26,000 years ago, the sea levels drop and the land bridge opens up. By 20,000 years ago, humans are successfully living in this Beringian refugium. Then, the climate begins to warm. Those massive glaciers blocking North America start to melt. By 14,000 years ago, these populations are rapidly expanding southward, filling North and South America. But, of course, that warming climate had a cost. By 11,000 years ago, the melting ice raised the sea levels back up, and the Bering Land Bridge was completely swallowed by the ocean.
Which brings us to a pretty stark realization when we compare the past to the present. 20,000 years ago, this region was a bustling, life-sustaining, 1,000-kilometer-wide plain that connected the world. Today, as we saw at the start of our explainer, it is an impenetrable, freezing, 55-mile militarized ocean border that keeps the continents firmly apart.
What you should really take away from this is how deeply our human story is tied to the whims of the Earth. The exact same geographic coordinates that served as a welcoming, grassy highway for our ancestors now require a modern-day adventurer like Carl Bushby to dedicate 27 years of his life, dodge border patrols, and risk freezing to death just to cross. The Earth's changing climate literally draws and redraws the boundaries of what is possible for us.
We look at a map today and we think the borders, the oceans, and the coastlines are permanent, but they aren't. They are temporary. They're really just a snapshot in geological time. So I'll leave you with this thought. If it takes a 27-year expedition to cross this gap today, but it was just a walk on a grassy plain in the past, what on earth will this map look like 20,000 years from now? Thank you so much for exploring this with me, and I'll catch you in the next